it's me, Sam Bee. Just in case you're curious, those who are watching this right now on YouTube get to check out my beautiful floral shirt, which is about as close to a Hawaiian shirt as I'll ever get. Anyway, if you love a visual, have at it. Listen, for as long as I can remember, speaking of visuals, I have always loved watching movies and watching TV. Truly, they were the best babysitters, the only babysitters when I was growing up. The fact that I work in the entertainment industry and see how little tiny ideas become incredible art never ceases to tickle me, because that is just what film and TV are. Art. There is beauty somewhere, sometimes hidden, in every show. There was skill and there is passion and human effort in everything that you see on the screen, which is why I have some serious choice words for the corporate ghouls who are literally disappearing projects in favor of tax breaks. Tax breaks. Oh, it's so true. Recently, we have seen like a cruel trend, like a tsunami of companies and their executives removing, literally disappearing existing or in production projects, because if they never see the light of day, those companies can say that the films or shows are worth nothing, and then they take a multi-million-dollar tax break from the loss. I mean, can you imagine spending years making a project and then once it's finally done, rather than millions of people getting to watch it, someone in a corner office decides to basically flush it down the toilet for a tax break instead? That is so painful. It has happened so often, with like well-known, recently completed movies. Like, remember Batgirl and Coyote versus Acme? I mean, that is just like a drop in the bucket. Full libraries are just gone, not available. Even a show, a perfect show, if I may, like The Detour, which my husband and I worked on tirelessly for years. It is such a gem, and it is impossible to find. And that is too bad. So deeply upsetting, because now you're never going to get to see me play my own husband's mother. Yes, of course that was weird for both of us. Look, I may not have a business degree, but I do know that this can't possibly be the best long-term business decision. Is disappearing art to please shareholders really where we want to be? Ugh. This is Choice Words. I'm Samantha Bee. Yes, my guest today is the funny, super funny, and thoughtful Paul Scheer. You definitely know Paul from TV shows like The League and Black Monday and the podcasts How Did This Get Made and Unspooled. Paul is truly like a true fan of film, which is why we bonded over our fury at companies who are just like removing movies from our world. Oh, God. But don't despair. At least we still have books. His new book, Joyful Recollections of Trauma, is out now. So take a listen and make good choices. I'm so excited to be talking to you right now.
I am too. I'm such a fan.
Okay, tell me about, before we get into the whole, how was your book tour to it? When did you release it?
May 21st.
May 21st.
I don't know if I understood exactly what this was.
Right.
I don't understand. It's like, it seems like it's a never-ending race.
Yeah.
Although there are markers at certain points that you can look at and be like, okay, I did this and now I'm here.
Yeah.
But it's been fun. And also the interesting thing is reading. And I've found that that's quality that seems to be going on a side where people don't really get it. People don't jump into that pool that much anymore, so it's interesting. I mean, a lot of people do.
They do.
But yeah, I guess when I was a kid, or even when I was in college and post-college, I would hang out in bookstores, get books, have books, and I don't know if that's happening that much anymore. So thank God for audiobooks and things like that.
Thank God.
In the grand scheme.
We love it. We love it when people read a book, and we love a book tour. We love to go out there and sling that book.
The best part of the book tour has been meeting everybody.
Right.
I know that sounds like very show busy to say, but I had the most fun on my book tour. It was exhausting, but it was amazing to just travel around. I still have other things that I'm doing. And I love it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, it is great. It's so funny. Okay, so we're going to talk all about it. But first, I'm going to want to talk to you about big choices, because you've made some big choices in your life. And this podcast is called Choice Words. So we lead with the concept of choice. And you talk a lot about it, actually, in your book.
I was thinking about this idea of where do I talk about choice to you?
Right.
Because there's a very easy way into it and saying the hardest choice I've ever had to make, I think, is having kids, because that's a no take back choice. That's going to change everything. Yep. But I'm also is that too easy to say? Is that a choice that's too easy? I can talk about anything, because I think we both are in a world where you're constantly forced to make choices. You have these moments oh my God, thank God I chose that, because I would be in this Gwyneth Paltrow sliding doors moment, where maybe it all goes south really fast.
Totally. When I read the book, one thing that stood out to me is that you chose your college trajectory by following in the path of Theo Huxtable. And I think that's a brave.
that may be the dumbest choice I've made. Yes. So I decided to go to NYU because Theo Huxtable from The Cosby Show, a show that I love. Yeah. I was oh, well, Theo went to NYU. I should go to NYU. That was the extent of the thought put into it. I did not know anything else. It wasn't oh, I don't want to go too far away from home. I just had no focus, no career aspirations. There was nothing that was pulling me forward. Right. And you were faced with this decision, you have to go to college. Not even by my parents, just societal norms state you finish high school, you go to college. And I was just I don't know, I'll go where Theo went. And that was, I did one application. I think I was forced, because I went to school in New York State, to do a couple, you did one application for all the SUNY schools. Yeah. That didn't count in my mind, because that was I was in a college prep school that they were you have to fill out the form to go to a SUNY school. Right. So I did that. But the only college I applied to was NYU.
That was the only college that you applied to. I feel sad sometimes when I think back about The Cosby Show, because it was so influential. I think you were a latchkey kid. I was a latchkey kid, only child. These television programs functionally raised us.
100%. When you just said that term, latchkey kid, I think about that a lot. I would never feel comfortable with my kids.
Oh my God.
Home. My kids are 7 and 10. I was coming home at that age, and I was I'm just in the house by myself. Oh, I would go bonkers knowing that. I'm freaked. I couldn't deal with that.
Can I tell you something? This is so stupid and embarrassing. I have 3 kids. Mine are a little older than yours, but same. I would never have, until they were probably, I might have actually just stopped doing it. I would close the toilet seat every single night. So in case they stumbled out of bed in the night, I didn't want them to hit their head in the bathroom and drown in the toilet. Do you know what I mean?
Oh my God. First of all, I love that. I mean, my oldest is 10. So I can say for the last 10 years, I have not slept solidly through the night, because I feel one ear is always just attuned to they moved in the bed. Are they up? Is something going on? What's happening? Because, when I was a kid, I did this thing. My parents were divorced, and my dad lived in Queens, and I would spend the weekends with him. One night, I got up in the middle of the night. I believe I was sleepwalking, and I walked out of his apartment into the city streets of Queens. And the door locked behind me, and I left. It was And when I kind of put it all together, I was outside my dad's house. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and not a house, apartment.
Okay.
And I was on the street just in my pajamas, and I didn't know what to do.
Oh my God! What did you do?
I walked down the block to a payphone, called my dad collect. And my dad picked up the phone, like, hello. I'm like, Dad, it's me. I'm outside the house. I locked myself out. And I was just maybe in 4th or 5th grade. Like, I was not that old. I don't know what happened. I think if I really think about it, I probably was hot and I was trying to get cool. So I opened the door and then I walked outside. I don't know what it was, but I just remember being awake and in the street.
In the streets.
In Flushing.
In the streets in Flushing. In your jammies. In your little...
Just in my jammies, no shoes.
No shoes. No shoes. Oh.
That's why I do, like, we have an alarm in our house. I'm like, okay, at least if our kids open a door.
Yeah.
And many mornings, that is how I'm woken up, because my son will be like, I wanted to play basketball. So I open the door at 5:45 in the morning, and every alarm, it's like, but at least I know. At least I am like being alerted.
Right. Do you worry ever that because it is such a sharp contrast to the, we'll talk all about your childhood for sure, and your book is largely about that, but like, do you worry that your children won't have that kind of independence or grit? Like, I do worry about my children forming grit, because I feel that you and I are made of grit. Like,
you have to be made of grit, right? Like, I mean, but do you need it that, I don't know, because it's like, I definitely grew up with grit. You grew up with grit.
Yeah.
We get it, but then did we get it too early? I don't know. I mean, I think the grit that I thought I had quickly showed to be not much at all when I finally did go to NYU.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, this is different. Like it was like, yeah, I can handle anything. And I think I had some street smarts. I think that's the most important thing, is like, how do you get your kids to be street smart, but not put them in a position to mess up too bad, I guess.
Right. Like, not mess up too badly, but also not be too fearful.
Right.
Like, you can put a lot of fear into your children. You want to get the balance right.
I was completely tortured by the idea of, like, a strange person will pick you up and take you away. Like that, like being kidnapped, the way it was spoken about in my family, it was like it was happening nonstop. It was like, it's going to rain on Wednesday, 10 kids are going to be kidnapped in the same day. It's like, it's just, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember that case of that missing kid, Adam? His dad became John Walsh. He did the show. Right. Yeah. That story, for whatever reason, really locked into me. Like, Adam was just at the mall and he was just there and it was taken. And it just, to be taken was.
To be taken.
I didn't want to be took. But yeah, that was a real scary thing. I talk about, my grandma told me this story when I was a kid, that there was a rogue butcher in town,
right? And
the butcher would basically wait until parents left the house, knock on the door, and then kidnap kids. And what is he doing with all these kids? And then the end of the story was a mom came home, her kid wasn't there. Johnny, where are you? And then starts to make chopped meat for dinner. She's making burgers for dinner. And then she looks at the burger, and the burger looks up at her and says, "Mommy." And that was like, this story that like is burnt in my brain about like why not to open the door for a rogue butcher.
Yeah.
And
yes. Yeah. And because the butcher not only chops up your child, turns your child into chopped meat, he then sneaks back into your house to populate your fridge with fresh meat.
There's a lot of questions about this butcher and what he does. I will say, on the book tour, someone came up to me after one of the things and said, "Is your grandma Italian?" And I said, "Yeah, she is." And he goes, "Well, my grandma's Italian," and told me about a winemaker who went around kidnapping children and bleeding them out for
wine,
fresh wine
to ferment, to turn them into wine.
I mean, these are crazy stories. I mean, and obviously everyone's got their own levels of it, but like, that was like, these were told as truths. And I think like when you get older and you start to realize, like, the first time I went to a doctor, like as an adult, and he's like, "Oh, tell me your family history." And I started like telling him these stories like, oh, well, he died of a broken heart. I'm like, wait, hold on. What does that mean?
Oh.
Right, but you're fueled these things.
I've got a couple of those in my family too. And you're like, that's not real.
No, broken heart is not a thing that you die of.
That's not possible. There were other factors at play.
Did you get in trouble when no. Were you like, okay, like I stayed and I towed the line.
Okay.
When I was at home in that way, like when I was like, I tried to really be respectful of the house and do my thing,
Well, I want to say that I was pretty ignored but then I became a criminal. I had a brief enterprise as a criminal because
what was your, what did you do?
We would steal cars. Me and my boyfriend would steal cars.
Whoa.
I was so bad. I mean, it's so bad.
Wait, steal them? And then what would you do with them?
Like sell pieces of chunks of them.
Whoa, you were doing like full, okay. Cause like
bad. It's not, I don't have like pride about it, but I do talk about it because it's like it was like choosing in life between going down a terrible path and going back to being like a good student. So there was a crossroads.
I think it's interesting because not that everybody should steal cars.
No.
But you do need to see like kind of both sides of an equation, I think, sometimes.
Right.
Because when I stole cars as a kid, it was just for joyrides. And it wasn't like stealing strangers' cars. It was like, but that's so incredibly dangerous. Like we didn't have licenses.
Right.
And we were just like, oh, we could get out, we could do this thing. We're driving around. We're a danger to everybody on the road. We're a danger to ourselves.
Yeah.
And you start to like, I think that's when like your personality forms, like in that way of like, this is fun, but it also is wrong.
It's like, I don't want to live the rest of my life like this. Like, I don't think I want to lean into this. It's actually like, it's fun listening to you talk about like the dark side of growing up. It's a really vulnerable book.
I feel like I really appreciate you saying that. For me, I love people's stories, and even if they're not the same story,
right?
It is something that I can connect to on an emotional level. And when I first started writing the book, it was like, oh, I can just tell these like funny stories. But I always knew that like the anecdote is funny and it can live over here in a dinner conversation. But then like the real story behind the anecdote is like is actually more interesting. And people kind of my agent that I have for the book really pushed me in that direction. It's like just go deeper. You could go deeper. And I think there's a thing. I watched a Steve Martin documentary.
Okay.
Something about it really was interesting. Like, he collects all this beautiful art. And at one point they play this clip and it's like mid-90s, and they're like, oh, tell us a little bit about the art that you have. And he's like, and he takes this moment. He's like, actually, no, that's my private business and I'm not going to talk about that.
What?
And it was so interesting to see him like get defensive about like, tell us about the art that you're collecting, right? It wasn't like
the pictures on the wall that you're showing us.
Yeah. And he was like, that's my private thing. And now he's married and he has this daughter who I think is like 12 years old now. And now he talks about his art all the time.
Okay.
And he was talking about like how he had to keep certain things private because he didn't feel like he could share it because it was like something that was personal. And now he actually has a marriage and a child. And those are the things that he wants to keep tight to him.
Oh.
And he can actually share the art. Like he had nothing in his life. Like he felt a connection to it in a way. And I thought I know it's not the same exact thing, but there's this moment, I think, when you've made peace with it or and I have the book isn't like therapy. It's like a reflection of therapy.
Right.
Like I'm not like, and I think that I was able to like let it go because I've been able to like deal with it. It wasn't like I was giving it over to people to then, everybody can make their own assumptions on what it is, but at least I know I'm safe with it. And I feel like, thank God I did that because when it is out there, people say random crazy shit to you.
They do.
It's wild.
And you have to be so okay talking about it. Like, because you have to go on a tour. You have to talk about yourself. Yeah. Like you have to tell the story in a way that is like funny, but also reflects the real emotion. And that can be really tricky.
And people will come at you with things about you or about things in your life. And if you're not like comfortable with where you're at, and that's, I think for me, talking about these stories, and I talk about like abuse, I talk about like just growing up in this household where we kind of had to escape this man. Like I was finally able to do it, I think, once I had kids, because it also gave me a perspective that was different. Like I think like seeing my kids grow up, I don't know how you feel about this, but like seeing my kids grow up, I'm kind of blown away by how delicate they are. And, and then looking back and being like, oh yeah, my parents were like, jump in the pool and you'll learn how to swim. And it's like, and I think there's like a middle ground. Like what's that middle ground of like not throwing them in the pool,
right?
But also not like protecting them, like don't get in the pool. It's like, how do you find that middle ground of like raising a kid the right way where they have this independence, they can get there. But I think when I had kids, it was like when I started to understand like the frailty of a child and emotionally where their minds are.
And I feel like when you have your own children, it just like reframes everything. And the times were different too. So contextually, really no one parented the way that we are currently parenting our children. So it would have not been normal in a way if anyone had ever been home to receive me.
Oh, no, I mean, and that's the thing. It wasn't like, oh, everybody else had this amazing life. I mean, it's like, I think it's a sort of like how it starts to like reflect on you and what your parents do. Like the best advice I was ever given as a parent. We have a friend who's a child psychologist, and June's dad passed away right when our second child was born. So our first child was about 3 years old and could understand something happened. But, death is tricky. Like that's a hard thing to digest. And we're like, how do we talk about it with him? And she was like, look, my rule of thumb is be honest, but be brief. And that has really been like a go-to for me. It's like, oh, how can I not lie? Because I think that that's the thing that I'll say that I can just speak of my parents. My parents lied a lot, I think, to sugarcoat things.
Right.
But that's where you get into these problems where you start to be like, when those things start to unravel, that's like the biggest thing. Like my kids, like they'll ask me about Santa Claus. And I'll be evasive, but I also don't like triple down. Like when my 10-year-old was on the verge of figuring it out, I'm like, I'm not putting you in a position to go back to school and be made fun of. Like you're here, you're 78% believing that there's no Santa. Like we can rip this, or actually it was more like 90. I was like, we're going to rip off this 9%.
Right.
And, he wanted to know, but he didn't want to know. But it's like, but better that than digging a deeper ditch of a lie and be like, well, certain kids don't believe, and this is it. It's and I think that like our parent, or at least my parents, did a lot of like lying to normalize,
right? Like pretending to live together when they were actually separated.
My parents lived together for years in this fake version of our life where my dad would come in the morning before I got up and be in the kitchen, and my mom was, I was living with my mom. But they stayed in the same house, or they before they even did that, they were like staying in separate bedrooms, but like creating this illusion for me. I didn't come to terms with that until I got older, because I would tell it as a cute story, like, oh, wasn't it so cute? My parents would do this thing. They stayed together for like 3 years. And I don't want to sound like, oh, woe is me, like play this like little violin now. But it's like, it does fuck you up when you're like, oh, what's real? What's not real? I think that really played havoc in my own relationships. Like what's true here? If that could be fake, is everything fake? Right.
And you kind of look back on that time, and probably there was an unsettling undercurrent too. The whole time.
Well, you knew it was wrong. Like, right. Like there's something about it, like, and I think that that's the thing too, is like kids can sniff it out on some level, and like you're not asking all the questions. I remember I would always like try to make them hug, right? Like, which is something that like, right, I knew like on some level, if I can make them hug, is that going to help this? Or I don't know. You're right about like when you have kids, you also, I think, learn to forgive your parents as well, because you are a parent and you make mistakes as well.
You do. And you see that you can, like, sometimes I'm mad about certain things. Like I kind of would get mad about certain things. And then I'm like, no. It's just, I can't re-understand my life with this context, but I can't believe how much I was alone. Like I was in such danger so many times. And I'm really just very lucky to be intact.
Look, my kids are not climbing trees.
Yeah.
But I think about that too. It's like, oh, like, are kids climbing trees? If they fall out of a tree, boom, they're like, and they fall on their head, they're dead, right? Like, it's like, I can't protect them. That's the most childlike activity you could possibly have. Yeah. And we had different things, like I was walking 1.5 miles to a bus stop, like, to get on the bus, like in the cold, in the rain, like there are just certain things that you did. I tell the story in the book about, like, I had a home invasion because my stepfather wasn't going to pay this bill that he had. And this guy, like, was trying to break into our house. And I was the only kid. I was an only child. So I was like trying to hold down the fort while this like grown man is like Winnie the Poohing through a window, trying to like squeeze into our house. And I'm just like beating him off with like a Halloween costume ninja sword, like, and when I came home, or my parents came home, they were like, well, you're fine. And it was like, yeah, I'm fine. Right. I didn't get hurt. Like, yeah, he didn't get in. Life is fine. Like, life is good. Meanwhile, like, somebody called my youngest son fat the other, during the school year, and we're like on the phone immediately, like, hey, what's going on? How are we doing?
Oh my God. My husband. Okay. Do you know my husband? Do you know Jason Jones?
I'm a very big fan of Jason, but I don't know him.
Well,
yes. The Detour is one of my favorite shows of all time. I love it so much.
So funny.
It was like the perfect show.
You can't ever get it. Did you know that it disappeared from this earth? Not available.
I as a person who has many shows that have been disappeared, it makes me furious. And I know we're talking about banned books, and I'm very much, yes, we should be talking about banned books, but we should also be like trying to figure out like a free digital library for all these shows that have been pulled away from existence. Because it's art. It is art.
It's art.
It's
the history of us.
It really is. It's like there are things that you can't get, and it's like people put their blood, sweat, and tears into this stuff, and it's good. And it's only reason why it's not available is because some idiot decided it's a tax write-off, and they don't care about it. But it's like, it's wild.
We have to go back to the time when you were growing up and you were making your own video library by taping, by recording movies.
I had 2 VCRs that I connected together with some AV cords, and I was sitting there transferring movies. I was breaking copy protection. I was taping movies off a pay-per-view. I started a whole. My dream was, because I don't know. Did you like know that you wanted to do?
No.
Comedy? Yeah, I don't.
Not at all.
I didn't know it was a path that was even available.
I didn't know it was a job. I could see that it was a job for other people, but it didn't. It was not. It was not accessible. It wasn't like there's no path.
Nobody in my family was at all involved in that at all, and it was sort of like the closest I could get was like, I like TV, I like movies, video stores are popular. I would like to own a video store, because that to me is like the closest I can get to Hollywood, right? Like, and I didn't even know Hollywood. It was just like that's power.
That's power.
Like, and it was like, and here I am, like renting Ferris Bueller's Day Off to like my teachers. Like they're meeting me in a hallway being like, hey, can I get Ferris Bueller's Day Off for the week? I'm like, yeah, you could do it.
Yeah, I think I can accommodate you. Jason tells this story of when because he played hockey as a kid. We both grew up in Canada, and he was like, like a hockey kid, like a lot of Canadian kids. And he, one time at school, he had lost his teeth. Like he has lost his teeth, his front teeth many times, but a kid sucker punched him in the face at school. No, I think he was like, why are you looking at my girlfriend? Like sucker punched him in the teeth. His teeth fell out at school, and he came home and he was like, my teeth are gone. And his parents were like, what did you do? And then they never even called the school. It was just so normal. Like that's how we all grew up. Like his parents were like, why would we, like there was no thought to call the school to be like, this child who punched my child. Like we didn't even do that. It wasn't.
We didn't follow up.
No follow up. I mean,
I talk about this all the time. Like, if most people were to describe me, I think they'd say I'm a bald man with a gap in my teeth, right? And like, and these are things that are true. But the gap in my teeth, we like went to one dentist. He's like, nah, can't close that. That's not true. Not a true
impossible
statement. He's like, yeah, nope, I can't do that. And Never went to a second opinion. Never like followed up on it. It was like, that was it. That was it.
Right.
Didn't even go to a dentist. Like, we didn't even go to an orthodontist. I don't believe. We just went. Now, look, I'm very happy with my teeth. Many people will tell me, you can close it. Yes, I'm aware at this point. I got it. I've chose not to. But like doctors and stuff like that. Like it wasn't. I mean, I went to a doctor, but it wasn't like. I just feel like for 2 years I would tell my parents, "Oh, my teacher writes so lightly on the board."
Right.
No, she didn't write lightly. I needed glasses.
No, it took me to an eye doctor.
Yeah, that's the problem. I can't see. Not like the teacher's writing lightly.
Why does she have such a delicate touch?
She's so gentle on it. So it's like, those are like the things. It's like, I'm also lucky to be like, my kids go to sleep and I'm online planning camps and stuff like that. I don't have to do that during the workday. My parents were working their asses off. Like, I can send an email. Like, imagine if I had to like do everything by calling places, finding out where the camps were. Right now I could type in my zip code and type in like basketball camp and zip code and be like, okay, got it. Like I'm in a zone.
Right.
I don't ever have to talk to anyone, or even just getting around with GPS. I give my parents a lot.
With a map, with a physical map, like laying it out on the hood of the car and tracing it.
Where are we going?
Like, our parents were cartographers.
Yeah, they were out there like going to different spots. I mean, I'm moving all around LA. I'm going to all these tournaments, soccer tournaments, basketball tournaments. I was like, if I didn't just, by the way, I'm also doing it at 8 a.m. So the fact that I don't have to like worry about where I'm actually going, I just put it into a machine and the machine's like, this is the exit, dummy. Get off.
You talk in the book about being like formally understanding that you have ADHD and having like lived your entire life not knowing that, although people around you suspected.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like this thing. I think that was a chapter I was really like hesitant to put in the book, in the sense that, there's a thing of when you talk about that's when I found out that I was this, or that, it's like, it's like, there's an element, I think, always as like somebody who does comedy where I'm like, and I was like a little like, but it was an incredibly like big moment for me as an adult, and it's changed so much. And the funny thing is like, I talk about, being in my 40s on Twitter, which is where I find out like I'm getting like a little battle of words with somebody on Twitter, and they're like, "You have ADHD, you're hyperfocusing." And I'm like, "I don't not have ADHD. What is even hyperfocusing?" And I put it down and then I Google it, and then I'm like, "Oh, I kind of do that. What's this?" And then I kind of go deeper and deeper. And within an hour, I'm reading all these stories and essays. I'm like, do I have ADHD? And that wasn't how I diagnosed myself, but it was the beginning of my diagnosis. And it changed everything. And the crazy thing is that this is a chapter I didn't want to put in the book. And everyone was like, you have to. And it's been one of the interesting chapters because I've talked to so many people who found out like after having kids, and that was the thing. Like, there's so many late diagnoses. Like I was saying, June and I were joking last night. I was just told, you are bad at this. I'm bad at math. Like, it was like, no, you're just bad at it. You will never be able to figure that out. And it was like, it's like, oh, because I'm slightly dyslexic. I flick around numbers. But it was just like, we just believe like, oh yeah, I'm not good at writing. I'm not good at math. Like, whatever the thing was. And there was no deeper introspection on it. You just kind of did it. And you just embraced this thing. So for me to find out, I always kind of compare it to like, I was a building that had scaffolding on it. Like, it wasn't falling down. I could be functioning. I paid my bills. I did my work. I got it done on time. I did it in crazy ways, but I did it. Now it's like I've been able to take some of that scaffolding off and live a little bit more like, oh, this is a lot. I have tools that now are better suited because I understand like what my issues actually are.
Are you good at making choices now? Like, did it help inform how you make big decisions about things? Because I feel like you talk about being paralyzed, I guess, by the plethora of choices that are available, or just like this feeling of like, there's just too many options. How do you narrow it down? Do you feel like that has helped you kind of just like focus how you decide on things in your life?
There's like that saying, it's like, oh, that person's like a horse with blinders on. Like, and that's a bad thing. Like, oh, they don't see anything. But when I am medicated, and very lightly so, I am a horse with blinders on, and it makes my life so much better because I'm focused forward. I'm like, I am not being pulled in a million different directions. And it allows me to like address the tasks at hand. I also know like part of like the ADHD of it all is an emotional component, which I didn't understand, like this thing of like everybody hates me. And they, and amplified by the world of that we are in, like the rejection that we get all the time. And I think there will always be like a million decisions, but I feel like once I make a choice, I can commit to it and not go track back.
Right.
I think that's the biggest difference. What do you think about in choice? Because I know this is, part of the podcast is this. Like, do you think that we make the success of the choice? Like, I mean, there's always like, oh, what could have been? But would we have gotten back to it? Or like, because it's sort of like we are the constant. Like the choice is like a subway stop. We could have gotten off on 55th Street, or we could get off on 42nd Street. Like it's a little further away, but we'll still get to our spot.
Yes. Yeah. I like hearing how other people do. I like hearing how other people do it. I know how I do it. And I think it fluctuates. I think it changes from day to day. Sometimes I'm very decisive and sometimes I really waffle, and I don't know why I think I can change the outcome of anything. It's actually kind of challenging to be truly true to yourself, to know what you want to do. And I like hearing stories of people who just like find a true thing about themselves and then they just keep going forward. Sometimes it is just like one step in front of the other, and then you just live with that choice. Like I don't really live my life with regret of any kind.
I think it's so important to do that immediate trust of your gut.
Yeah.
Like immediately, like even if it's like the minute you have to talk yourself into something, you are going down a path of despair. And the one thing I found in this business, because this is like, we're podcasting, we're substacking, we're making TV shows, you can make the best whatever, TV show, movie, whatever, and no one can watch it. And if it was horrible to get to that place, it's not going to be fulfilling. I'm like, part of me is like, if I had a great time, I did the show Black Monday with Don Cheadle, Regina Hall, and Andrew Rannells. I love those people. I love the crew on that show. I realized not many people had Showtime. That's really like everyone's like, I don't have Showtime. I really want to watch that show. I don't have Showtime. And that's another show that's currently like disappeared. But like I found myself knowing like if I'm having fun while doing it, because nothing is guaranteed on the other side of it. Yeah. So let me just enjoy the actual process of doing, because I'm not in that world anymore where it's like, well, that was hell, but at least it got me this. Yes. I don't find that fulfilling anymore. It's like, oh, I'd rather just be like, I had the best time. Who cares? I'm proud of the work. Yeah. I'm proud of the friends I've made. I don't have any appetite for that struggle of being miserable anymore. And I think so many people embrace miserable as like, well, you got to be miserable to make something good. And like, I don't know.
I love how you put the building blocks of your career just together, just like really brick by brick from a place of total passion. Like you also don't go into improv comedy thinking I'm going to be able to pay a mortgage one day. You do it because you love it, and you make choices based on your actual passion for this thing.
Well, I think the cool thing about improv, I think it's like you're constantly making choices. Right. And you're making choices and you have to trust the people that you're on stage with. And a good improviser is like, that's like the best thing, because you're learning like the most true things about life in improv, which is like, whatever that other person says, I have to agree to it and then add to it. And if we all approached like every endeavor, every work endeavor, every home endeavor as being like, instead of like fighting against the current, just like, yes, and this thing. And I'm actively listening to my partner, whether it's on stage or in the house. It's like, and I'm just trying to make it better. We're better instead of like bringing it all down. There was like a thing I remember reading about the Looney Tunes, the cartoons. Like they have these big meetings. They were never allowed to shoot down an idea. Good ideas will rise to the top. Bad ideas will never be brought back. But we spend so much time. I mean, I've spent so much time in a writer's room, like arguing why something won't work or like why I don't like something. And when I've tried to adopt this thing where it's like, you can't shoot it down.
Right.
You can, and by the way, if we go away from it, like you don't have to go back and like relitigate it. It's like it's wasted energy in a way. And I feel like that's what improv, like at the root of it, is kind of always trying to do, is just trying to be like, no, just move forward. Just move forward. You only have what you have in front of you. So just make that work.
I like that you said active listening, because I feel like that is where we're just not in a place of active listening where you're just like hearing people, really hearing them. And that is such a skill that you can bring forth from all of that work.
And it's hard. It is like, it's hard. It's like, because we all come with our own stuff and we think we know a lot. I'm trying, like, I think when I get into fights with June, or for a while, it came from a thing of like, well, I didn't mean it that way, or I didn't say like, but I'm not like actually hearing what she's saying, right? I'm not hearing like what she's saying is like, I'm hurt. It doesn't make a difference how I intended it to come across. You're hurt, and that's fine. And like, and acknowledging, like, just like hearing what she's actually saying, which is not like you meant to hurt me. It's like, it's just like, and I think that that's another thing too. Is it's like I'm just try to be better at that, and try to take myself out of it and just really be like, I'm not in my own head here. I'm just hearing you say what you're saying, and hopefully it's not about me trying to think about the next thing I'm going to say. It's like I'm reacting to the thing, which is, I think, all of what we do.
It's I've interviewed a lot of people whose spouses are in the same industry as them, but I've also interviewed your wife, and I love that you like working together. I think because I like working with my husband. Yeah. It's kind of rare.
I think it is. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way I love seeing you two work together, and I feel like you both approach it the same way that we do, which is like, we are separate entities who also like to work together.
Right.
Like, we are not a duo. Like, we are performers who work together. We do our own things. We do things separate. And I think that that's really important to have our own path, because I think first and foremost, we are a married couple with kids. That's above all else.
Right.
And then it's like, how do we just work together? And I think it's more delicate, but I also think you get the rewards you reap from that relationship and that knowledge of each other, and where you would go is amazing. But I do think it's a balance. I think you have to pay attention to it. It's not like I can't treat her like I treat another person I do a bunch of things.
Right. And you write together too. You write together and perform together. Do you write?
We don't, like, we haven't like written together in the sense that like we've produced things together.
Okay.
I've written stuff that she's done.
Okay.
She's written stuff that I have done. And then for the podcast, I really take a brunt of the work from Jason and June, in the sense of I want them to just show up and talk.
Okay.
And then and so it allows us to kind of have some separation of like church and state in a little bit. Like, I think it's important to kind of find it. But we're working on this pilot right now with Marta Kaufman and Hannah Cantor, and it's been very creative, and we very much we combine our notes, and we are sitting there. So there is a dialogue there, and it's different. I love it.
Do you still go see movies in theaters? Because you're just such a movie person.
I do, but I love seeing movies in theaters. Having kids, really, like, it's hard to figure that out. Like, it's either like I have to sneak out during the day, or when I'm away from my family. My kids don't love it. Like, they much prefer, like, if given the option of watching a movie at home versus a theater, like, I have to like con them into going to like the Alamo Drafthouse, where it's like, you can have ice cream there and you can eat nonstop for like 90 minutes. Like, all right, we'll go to that if we can have ice cream. But yeah, I love that experience of being there, but it's also like, I can never find the time. Like, I live right down the block from the Vista Theater, which Quentin Tarantino has taken over, and they're doing like these amazing, like, oh, we're gonna play Lawrence of Arabia, like on 70. I'm like, oh, that would be fun. I wouldn't want to watch that on a big screen. I want to see these cool things. I'm never gonna get to that.
I know.
I have no time for that.
I just read my local, like the theater that's down the street from me is playing Escape from New York, and I want to go see it. I want to go see it, and I'm like, who's gonna go with me? No.
Oh, well, that's it, right? It's like, oh, and June will never go. Like, June loves the movies too, but it's like, again, it's like, it's really got to be planned. And it's like, we both going out and we're going to both do this. Is this a movie we both want to see?
I know. Okay. Here's my last question. It's a real question, but I ask it randomly of a lot of people. So
sure.
I don't know. Okay. So we both went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
And had sex ed taught to us by our PE teachers.
Yes.
As Jesus intended.
The way it was supposed to be done.
Done perfectly. Done so well. No.
So with just every nuance, everything.
No follow-up questions. If you were redesigning sex ed, because you have, like your kids are aging into like really learning about their bodies. If you were redesigning it, what would it be like?
I think there has to be an acknowledgement that this is on some level embarrassing, right? Like, I think like sometimes we go into this thing like very antiseptically, like we're going to talk about penis and a vagina and we're going to talk about sex. And it's like our bodies are goofy and we have these questions and we have to feel like we can ask these questions in a safe space and learn these things. And I feel like I write about this in my book for one little brief moment where I said like, somebody asked about like, what's a period? And he's like, none of your business. And like high-fived a girl in the class. Like I'm well, why can't I learn about like what a period? Like, yes, I'm not having them as a man, but I would like, why is that being gatekept from me? Like, and I feel like there's this thing of like, how do we talk about, I think that there's like a puritanical thing that's like attached, especially in Catholic school.
Yeah.
Like, it's like sex isn't, it's like, I only learned about sex via don't get people pregnant. Yeah. It was like, and it's like, and I also didn't understand like how you could get people pregnant. I feel like it's.
Yeah. We never talked about like why anyone would ever do it. Like no one was ever like, just basically why would you? What's it what for?
Yeah. Like, it's like, I almost feel like we need to get like gross and weird and then specific because it's like let's put it all out on the table so everyone feels like they can, because I think that we go through life with all these concerns, it's like, what do bodies look like, what are like, and you can demystify it too, like that show where like they lift up that screen and you'd see like a person's shin and then you see their crotch and then you see their breasts and like it's like when you look at a body like that, it's so unsexual, like it's like, but we kind of like walk this line of like it's almost too sexual, we can't talk about it. And then because I feel like there were so many questions I was afraid to ask, I didn't know, and then you hear things. I didn't put this story in the book, but it was like kind of the part of the story. Like this gym teacher, a very shy girl in my class, she was sitting always like just one of those people who's a nerd, but no one makes fun of them for being a nerd because she's just lovely and that's it. Like she's, she gets up to go to the bathroom during one of our, health. It wasn't even sex, it was health. And she goes and the gym teacher's like, oh, hold on, everybody, check this out. And he grabs, and at this point, I don't know what this is because no one's taught me, a dildo out of his desk drawer, right? And he's like, look, and he goes to her lunch bag and puts the dildo in her lunch bag.
Oh my God.
And he's like making a kid like look out the door, like, is she coming back? And the kid's like, she's coming back. And then we all sit there, and this girl's walking into like a prank show.
Yes.
Right. Cause we all now know it.
Yes.
Again, this very sweet, nice girl. And then so she comes in, she sits down at at her desk and she starts taking out her like lunch. And, and the dildo is not doing anything yet. But we all are like, our attention is focused on her.
Tingling.
We're laser locked. And then the teacher's like, hey, wait a second. What is this? And like, he kind of like forces the reveal and pulls this dildo out of her bag. He's like, oh, hey, whatever her name is, Caitlin, what are you doing? And he's shaking this thing around. And first of all, it's the first time I've ever seen anything like this, which is wild. And then it's like being pulled out of this girl's bag. This girl is mortified. I'm sure if it's my first time, it's definitely her first time seeing this giant penis being waved around in front of her. And it's like, and it was like, oh, I'm just getting you. And it's like, that's like, like that was our sex ed.
That's
was like
an incredible story. Oh my, that was a That was a person who was an authority figure in your life.
Right. That was a person who was like, no reprimand for that. No. And like you said, no one went, like that girl did not go home to her parents and say, no, the teacher put a dildo in my bag and embarrassed me in front of the entire class with it.
Oh my God. You know what?
And it was like, oh, funny prank.
Funny. You're so funny, Rick. That's, oh my God. Well, oh my God. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I have just thought of the funniest prank for my kids to put in their school lunches. They love it. They're going to love it.
Thanks so much. This is a blast.
That was Paul Scheer. Oh, I loved him, and I had no choice but to look up one thing. We were talking about how we were both latchkey kids, which is such a funny phrase. What is the origin of that? Well, turns out that the phrase gained popularity during World War II when dads were serving in the army and moms were out of the house working for the first time. I should have guessed that this was women's fault the whole time. Thanks for joining us. I'm Samantha Bee. See you next week for some more choice words. Thank you for listening to Choice Words, which was created by and is hosted by me. The show is produced by Svea Baron-Reinstein with editing and additional producing by Josh Richmond. We're distributed by Lemonada Media, and you can find me at RealSamB on X and Instagram. Follow Choice Words wherever you get your podcasts or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership.